E2M On Air is owned by the Web Spiders Group, and it's the global leader in virtual event technology. And E2M Live is the leading video-first virtual event platform. So just, to reflect on kind of how we used to do things in person, the more traditional way to do things, how we knew the event world before the pandemic. It was in person, but it was also heading in a more virtual direction anyway, with the likes of the event apps, for example, running alongside conferences and things like that. And then when the pandemic hit, we were forced to change and adapt quickly so that we could put on these events, but in a virtual way. We had to really, like I say, adapt and develop rapidly ways in which we could put on events. And this all happened sort of like 5 to 10 years early, and we had to create ways in which to do this and still to create that buzz and excitement and spontaneity and encompass everything that we had from an in-person event. And so coming out of this pandemic is going to be really exciting, but also for the event world, because we're going to go into more of a hybrid mode, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And so the last 9 months or so has been a huge success, and it's not only made events possible, but it's been made, it's helped make them COVID safe and convenient and accessible for everyone. So going forward in this hybrid mode, we're going to have the best of both. Just as we have Netflix at the moment, but we can also, hopefully go to the cinema, and how we shop online, but we also like to still go to the shops. And there's room for both. There's room for this, virtual world and the in-person events to really merge. And it's going to be a really exciting time. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and get lots of hints and tips from Sid about how this is going to work. And first of all, we're going to talk about unique brandability. So we all know how important it is for individuality and to really have your events stand out and be remembered. And so, Sid, my first question to you is, with all this talk about event branding, how can event planners really amplify their brand visibility and put their sponsors right at the forefront of their virtual events?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Amy. A great tee off, and thanks for that insight.
That's okay.
So what we saw was, if you went to a traditional event today or pre-COVID, right? So you never went to if you went to a hotel ballroom, or let's say you were at the Excel Center, or you were at the Javits in New York City, you rarely go to an event where you just inherit the default branding of that place, right? It's very usual not usual, it's almost 100% where an event would brand the location. And I think that's not only a monetization opportunity, for sure it's a monetization opportunity because you can have, sponsor logos, etc. But even when it's a private event, let's say like a sales kickoff, you would often have, inspirational messages, or you would have partner branding. So let's say if you're a distributor and you have, partner brands that you want to promote. What we saw initially was that, some of the platforms were almost like a white space. It was like almost like a common brand for all events. So it felt like you were using any generic SaaS software, which pretty much looked. So, any of the SaaS software that including, I don't want to take names in a public forum, but any of the common names, and you will see that other than putting your company logo, it just feels the same. Now that's totally against the premise of what events are. So I think, today, many of our, customers and many of our guests today, we are not going to why virtual events or hybrid events. I think they know about it a lot. But one of the key insight was that you must choose a platform or invest in making sure it has a unique branding. So that was one of the key messages. And, whether it's welcoming to a branded lobby. So you probably saw that today. We quickly did up a lobby in in 15 minutes. Having an impactful brand exposure, logos, fonts, colors. You want to make sure that it reflects your company's. It feels like it's your, location. It's your venue. And that's so important. That's so important in creating that atmosphere
Yeah.
for your brand, for your event.
Yeah. To personalize it is really important.
Yeah, and of course, there's this monetization when you can sell that to exhibitors, put sponsors in front. But other than monetization, as I said, I mean, this is very often ignored,
Mm.
and this is one of the sort of, and the reason we put this as the number one point was, I think, people who are going virtual or hybrid must look at branding as a key element. And just to show you an example, like this is one lobby, and on E2M's platform, you can do this, right away, choose from a whole selection of lobby options. And
Mm.
this one looks very different. This was actually one of the first events we did in the COVID era. I mean, of course, we've done many before that, but this was in May, which was a hugely successful event, raising nearly $6 million on that evening.
Yeah.
It was published in Vogue as a case study. Uh, and then again, if you look at the agenda page, you can see there is the full opportunity to have, a branding not only on the banner, but even in the background.
Yeah.
So you can do that. This looks slightly different. Uh, and I can show you like so many examples where you would not even recognize that it's the same platform. So I think branding is really key. I think
Yeah.
that's the message. And this is another one where you can, and this is all self-service. You don't need a designer or programmer to do that.
Yeah.
So you can notice here that the colors have changed, the banner has changed. You can see these coconut trees, because this is actually an event in Bermuda. So appropriately, having the right background image.
Wow. I bet the weather's great there right now. Much better than London.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's
So
really great that you can change all the colors and
yeah,
really put your stamp on it. That's so important.
yeah. This is another one as well. And then I think as we move forward, from our roadmap perspective, I think it would be appropriate to mention that, with things like Unity and VR, and especially AR, we're actually making this almost like a gamifying it. So you can actually, click on the mouse or tap if you're on your mobile app, and actually move around the screen,
Yeah.
get a preview of what you are, connect. So it would be like almost feeling like a game kind of a thing.
Mm.
And that's what we're doing in 2021, as we grow this even stronger.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And in terms of hybrid events, it really makes the attendee who's tuning in virtually feel
Yeah.
a real part of the in-person event that's happening at the same time. It's really merging the two together. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hybrid is the name because it's not, it's a very positive cycle, because one enforces the other.
Yeah,
And to have a situation where an in-person event does not have any digital component, or vice versa,
yeah,
will feel very odd going forward in 2021 and beyond. And I think the entire world, and it's climate, and it's a green thing too. I mean, let's not underestimate the impact. Of course, from our side, we cannot talk at what the government can do, but trade shows, conferences have a very big impact. I mean,
mm,
the events industry is a $1 trillion industry.
yeah,
They say that, sometimes they say jokingly that it's the largest industry you've never heard of.
yes, yeah,
it's it's actually larger than the advertising industry. So if you put all the ad dollars, both online and offline, newspaper, radio, Google, Facebook, if you put all the ad dollars, that's roughly 700 billion odd, roughly.
yeah,
And so events is actually a much bigger spend
mm,
than the advertising industry itself, and which means that it has a huge impact. I mean, a lot of business travel has been focused around events, a lot of expenditure, especially for B2B.
yeah,
A lot of those have been focused, and they're not going to go away for sure in the next 5 years. But having both is really the key, and I think branding is a key way to retain that familiarity and not
yeah,
make it very clinical. That's
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Great. So then moving on to talk about web versus Zoom, which is really interesting. We're going to talk about when to use which. And obviously, a lot of events have tried to go virtual using conferencing tools like Zoom that we all
Yeah.
know about. And Sid, in your opinion, do you think that is the right approach? And so why go for full feature platforms when there are other web conferencing tools that exist that you could use?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, this is a it's a great question and a very simple question to explain. So I think they don't compete. Let's put it that way. Zoom does not Zoom or equivalent platforms, and somehow Zoom has actually stood out as the number one standalone meetings platform. An event an event can use, like, for one, this event is a micro event. We're just having it for an hour, but I mean, as I speak, there are, every day we have so many events live which are using, a lot of detailed and complicated agenda. So you don't, just using Zoom is not feasible because you have so many sessions, so many tracks, and there are different kinds of sessions. For example, streaming video. So if you've seen the Apple keynote where the iPhone 12 was launched, or, those were simulated live, right? So it was a pre-recorded video streaming live. So there's so many video formats. Zoom typically focuses on one format. But I think the other question was, what if, using Zoom, for example, we could have done this webinar in Zoom as well,
Yeah.
versus web. So I'll just to give you a disclaimer, this session today is assuming that you're already familiar with the real-time engagement world, the virtual world with events. So we're not going to go on the basics. So one of the things is, like, for example, right now we are on a web platform, and in the ideal world, Amy, web is the best because, there's really no plugin. It's seamless. It's universal.
Yeah.
That's so. If everything could be web, it would be great.
Okay.
Now, when should you use web? When Zoom? Now, Zoom is typically used, whether you are an ISV partner or not, as an app. So even if you're on desktop, you download an app. If you're on the phone, you have an app.
Yeah.
So one way Zoom has been used is, when you have a roundtable feature where you need more than 12 people. So most web-based videos. So, like, for example, there are two of us right now,
Yeah.
and you can say there's three of us in the sense that we are sharing a screen. So most web platforms do not encourage more than 12 people on one screen, sharing video real time. And that's because having 12 people doing back and forth is like 12 Netflixes going on back and forth.
Yeah, it's too much.
So as you know, the browser cannot access all the hardware capability. So you might have the best laptop in the world or the best desktop in the world, but your Chrome or your Safari or your Edge browser cannot access everything that your system provides. So if you need more than, for example, 12 people in a roundtable, then that's one reason you might use Zoom. So in fact, as I speak, just there's an event going on where they're having all the webinars like this one on the web, but they're having some big roundtables where you could have 20, 30 people in one roundtable. Now, you cannot have 20, 30 people on the browser. It will not work technically for everyone. It might work for some people if they have like an ultra strong infrastructure, high, you're talking about, many Gbps of bandwidth, but it will usually not work for everybody. And certainly for the audience, it might be an issue.
Yeah.
So that's one reason you might like to mix and match Zoom. And again, we are an ISV partner with Zoom. So what happens is that if you're subscribed to E2M, then you don't need to buy a license. You don't need to put a URL. It automatically spins up a new Zoom meeting. It goes to the Zoom server, automatically creates a meeting.
So that's great. So it really, you can quickly access the different rooms or the different sessions. Yeah.
So that's
great.
one reason you might use Zoom is when you want a roundtable. The other very important, sometimes what happens is that, like, we do events for all kinds of companies. There are government, there are corporate. Now, as people are hopefully getting into their offices, in some offices, they actually switch off web video to the point that even YouTube is not accessible. So in those situations, if you have a web-based platform, then if your IT administrator has switched off web video, or they have protected the ports, it may not be easy for you to always go back, put a request that please open these ports, please open these IP addresses. So for VPN firewall issues, sometimes we also use Zoom.
I see.
Yeah, but definitely the disadvantage of Zoom is that the brandability is low. It requires an app. The speed is, if you're jumping from one roundtable. So one of the features of roundtables is that you have interest roundtables, right? So one may be a golf lover roundtable, one may be a dog lovers roundtable. One might be on food. And what you want to do is be able to move from one to other. And that easiness is always, web is always preferred.
Okay, yeah.
So there are two reasons why I can think Zoom could be useful. One is when you want large meetings, like Zoom can have up to 1,000 people in a room, as most people know. The web can only go 12, which is a soft limit. 16 is typically the hard limit. Yeah, and then of course there's a VPN firewall issue. So we do both. So our customers, you mix and match based on the kind of session.
Yeah. That's
so
great.
I hope this was useful.
Yeah, that's really, really
long
interesting. And it's interesting to see kind of the benefits of using either one of those and how they can, complement each other to create an event. And to be able to have lots of people using Zoom is
and I'll give you a quick example. This is, for example, a web-based webinar going on, right? Something very similar to what we are doing. You can see there's a user count below, and you probably recognize this gentleman, very famous now. The leading authority in the US, Tony Fauci. So this was on web-based, and this is actually something known as an RTMP feed. So what happens is that the speakers are using Zoom, and they are streaming it live to E2M in real time. So that's another way to do it. So for example, let's say one of the speakers had a problem with the firewall and they could not use web, then the speakers could go use Zoom, and the others would get a live video stream, which would work across all browsers because of it would be equivalent to what Netflix does as in a stream. So this shows you two examples of integration of Zoom versus native web.
Yeah, I see. It's great to have the option of both. That's fantastic. So now moving on to the subject of agenda planning for different event durations. So it says here from 1 day to 1 year. I mean, 1 year just sounds amazing. And from what I understand, the virtual event agenda can look very different to the traditional in-person events. So how do you think the culture of virtual has really impacted event durations? Because at the start of the virtual events, kind of morphing into that, it seemed to be a lot shorter. Even going into sort of lunchtime breaks, and people didn't want to sit for very long. But as I see 1 year is here, do you think that has really changed? The duration is growing or staying the same?
So also I am getting very interesting questions as well coming up, Amy, as you can also see perhaps. What we'll do is we'll address that in a moment.
Okay, sure.
So this is another big learning, and actually one question I want to answer before we run off that, Joe mentions that Zoom can run in a browser. It can absolutely run in the browser, Joe, so there's no doubt about that. And we being a partner, we can run it, but you will rarely see it working because it can run on the browser, but it has then the same limitations of what if your browser is disabled for video. So in that case, we prefer a more native look. But yes, you're absolutely right. It can run on the browser. There are some limitations in terms of which browsers, but yes, for sure, it can run on the browser. So coming to this, I mean, this is another big learning for us, Amy, was when we started this, the usual size for a event was like for a luncheon or for a dinner. It was like an award ceremony, a fundraiser, or like a quick 3-hour at the most, like a one session.
Yeah.
And the usual explanation was that it would go from, it was, who would sit that long?
Yeah.
And what we've seen, across the whole of 2020 those 3 hours becoming 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, and you'll be amazed at this whole idea of, from of year-long events.
Yeah, I mean that's just sort of unheard of,
Yeah,
even for in-person events. It's always kind of been
yeah,
like a week or so. So
yeah.
a year long is impressive.
And one of the reasons for that is the fact that the moment, I think people went into the virtual world slightly because they had no choice.
Yeah,
That was the initial reaction back in April 2020.
yeah,
And as they started doing more and more events, they quickly realized that this is great,
mm,
this is lovely, and this works, this is cost effective, this is, so many things. And in fact, for example, there was one organization I remember, BNI, which was like uh, an entrepreneur's tool where every attendee was trying to sell to another attendee or get referrals. So it's a referral based network organization, hugely popular with the self-employed freelancers, about 360,000 odd members globally. And
okay,
when they used our platform, we were amazed that they said, like the round tables, we did not shut down the round tables. And we saw that when the event was ending at 5 p.m., till 10, 11 in the night, all the round tables were full.
mm,
And it was amazing because, we never expected that. They did not license it for that long, but we were pretty amazed. And then even when it finished, there was a strong feedback that, hey, we just want to keep doing that. Why cannot it be available, for me all the time?
yeah,
And then we will meet. And so this is one of the biggest, and there's a book as well. Actually, I got a reference from LinkedIn the other day from contact of mine, and there's a whole book about how live is being transformed
mm,
into a persistent experience. In fact, at WS and E2M ourselves, every day at 9 o'clock in the morning, we have a check-in call, and we've not missed a single day. Every day over the last 10 months, we've had a check-in call, and it's like an event.
yeah,
And so there are companies which are using that. So I'll come to that. There's a whole section on that.
yeah,
So from an agenda strategy, I mean, one is, one of the main decisions, and actually let me spend some time on this. Let me first check whether I'm not okay. We are on time.
yeah,
So one of the big decisions I think for all event or engagement is, do you want it pre-recorded live versus actual live?
mhm,
So this is actual live, right? But we could have recorded this and streamed it as live, and we could be quietly sitting and as an attendee
yeah, oh,
and watching it,
yeah,
and then on the slide came back and answered questions later. So there are a lot of use cases where pre-recorded is useful. There are a lot of use cases where actual live is useful. And I think that's one big decision. Most of our customers are doing a combination of both. So as an example, when there's a break, they are often using a video and streaming it. Sometimes if they have people from, let's say, where they want to edit the video, they want to insert different video footage, then they would often get an agency to do that, and
mm,
then have a pre-recorded streaming as live. And as I said, the Apple event is a great example of that.
yeah,
Then there was this question of, should you have a break? Because they feared that once you had a break, people will not return back, or
mm,
they will just go off into their real world.
mm,
And I think the answer is that, it's quite simple. If you're having a short event, don't give a break. And if you don't give a break, then what do? You give them an app so that they can keep up the engagement. You know, you don't expect them to sit for 4, 5, 6 hours, uh,
yeah,
but but if they have an app, then they can continue that experience.
yeah,
So, but as I said, like for example, right now there's a firm, professional services firm, where they're doing a 3-week retreat, employee retreat. We have another company which is doing a 30-day partner conference.
uh,
So of course, in those situations, they do have a scheduled break.
yeah,
So that's what we've seen. For year-long events, we've seen that a recurring cadence is really useful. So as an example, daily 9 o'clock check-ins,
Yeah.
or every Monday there's a keynote. It's also helped people, get into, especially when they're working from home, it also gets them into some form of, whether I should say discipline or an agenda. And it's, when you're at office, then it's easier to pull up people in a meeting room and just ask ad hoc. I think scheduling events, sessions at a specific time, especially when you're having a year-long event, is really useful.
Definitely.
And then another question that we get often is, when should the roundtable be structured? So roundtables, we'll get into a roundtable just after this. So, all the attendees, if you hang on, then you'll have the ability to join the roundtable. But essentially, one of the questions is, should you have the roundtable before a main session or after a main session?
Yeah.
I mean, really, in small events, like when I say small events, when you have a one-day event or when you have a luncheon, we generally recommend having the roundtable towards the end, because what we've seen is it's very difficult to take people out of the roundtable. Yeah. Sorry, was there a comment or?
No.
Okay, no.
Agreeing.
Sorry. And so there we would recommend having it right at the end, so that even if they keep going on, that's not a problem. But when you're talking about 5-day events, 15-day, 30-day events, and a year-long events, then they are usually, what we see, that they're usually clubbed after lunch, because what we've noticed is that the energies naturally drop after 2 p.m. So say 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. the energies are usually dropping. So if they are in a passive mode listening, then we find that the stats tell us that there's a lot of drop-offs.
Yeah.
So E2M has some of the most amazing, like we use Google's biggest infrastructure for analytics called BigQuery, and we get these interesting insights. And what we've seen is that if you're scheduling any major live one-way session during that time, there's a big drop-off from attendance.
Yeah.
But if you have a roundtable, then it's sort of, because you're talking and you're part of it,
Yeah.
the energy goes up again.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's a great way to think about it, because obviously it will get everybody talking and discussing, and especially if you have roundtables with like-minded people or even celebrities in, that's going to entice people in and get the conversation flowing and really give all the attendees a second sort of lease of life to get stuck in and keep them going. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So okay, and just moving on, parallel tracks and keynote scheduling. I think that's again a very important element. How do you schedule parallel tracks, keynotes? I think this is pretty much very similar to how you did in your real world. But the key insight that we've got is that try to do it either in the morning, especially the keynotes, or in the towards the evening, say 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, towards the end of the day. Parallel tracks, if you don't have roundtables, then it's best that after lunch is a great time to schedule parallel tracks as well.
Yeah.
So this is an example of streaming pre-recorded. So one of the elements was, how do you schedule? So this is like pre-recorded live, where it's edited before, but at the bottom you see that there is like a photo wall going on. So this was a fundraiser where they were texting or sending their selfies, and those were being pushed. So instead of just watching a show, they were keenly looking at how can they see themselves, and it made some form of participation. So one of the recommendations is that don't just have a video stream, have an engagement section just below that to enable.
Definitely. And in terms of going into hybrid mode, having that virtual experience and the Q&A, and in terms of just touching on the roundtables again, for attendees who are tuning in virtually, to have that experience in person. So you would have a setup of people attending in person, but also virtually at the same roundtable when you're in hybrid mode. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So now let's talk about this phenomenon.
Yeah.
Lots about online to offline to online. Just explain to us exactly what that is and the benefits around that.
Yeah. So this is this concept in retail was already known as O2O, which is online to offline.
Yeah.
Sometimes people thought offline to online. But what we're really seeing a clear trend now, especially in the engagement world, is online to offline, which means you've had an event online that encourages you to do as the economy opens up and as we probably in the second half of 2021 and surely in 2022, it encourages offline, but that offline behavior again encourages more online. And so it is a circular circuit where they're promoting each other. But what is clearly the trend is that the home is online.
Yeah.
Home is where you start and where you end. You may be going to work, or you may be going to play, or you may be going to perform, but you leave home in the morning, you do what you need, and you come back home.
The full
And
circle.
really, yeah, and home is online today.
Yeah.
That's where you live. uh, and this is the clear trend that we are seeing in events as well. And this is really transforming the event culture.
Yeah.
One of the biggest shifts is that events, by definition, is always time bound, right? It is focused on a certain time so that people spend their energy, people spend their attention, right, on that. But what we're seeing that while that is true, you still want casual engagement to continue. And that's a big start. And again, as I said, it starts online, expands offline, and continues online.
Yeah.
This is a very strong trend that we see. The other strong trends that we see is the 24/7 trade shows. Because the moment we've had trade shows and they look beautiful, I mean, you can just for the attendees later on, you can click on the exhibit and see an E2M booth. They look beautiful, and we'll show you some more things. But for most exhibitors, they say, why cannot I have this forever?
Yeah.
And there's no reason they cannot.
Yeah. Have the best of both.
Yeah.
Definitely. And yeah, you think that you can really engage attendees in year-long events and really recreate the energetic atmosphere that we have in in-person events. They can really immerse themselves in the experience and still get that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you're going to have an ebb and flow, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to have, like, the energy of an event can last for, say, 3, 4, 5 days. But what happens is that when the year is open, it's like you schedule your cadence, and for different people it might be different.
Yeah.
So one of the big problems of an event is that if the Consumer Electronics Show is happening in Vegas in in the first week or second week of January, you often miss it because you may be on holiday, or that may not be the best time for you. So while the core essence of an event is true, which is having a focused energy for a finite amount of time,
Yeah.
it recognizes that for different people, that cadence might be at different parts of the year.
Yeah.
This is a new culture. This is something that was noticed because of this transformative year.
Absolutely. It's really
Yeah.
and to be able to have the best of both, and like you say, cut costs with time and traveling, and one event you may
Yeah.
want in person and the next event you may want to attend virtually. I think
Yeah.
it's a great new era that we're entering.
Yeah. Because just imagine, the traditional business cards, like you're going off to meeting a person or a booth. Now, instantly that person becomes a connection online. So when you go back home or to your office,
Yeah.
you're not, the engagement is already started. You
Yeah.
already, you continue from that point onwards.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think we're running a little behind, but as I said, just to remind people, we are explaining key concepts here, and the next concept is something known as RTMP, and you're probably wondering why we have such a technical term in this. And let me quickly show you a diagram, and let me explain, Amy,
Yeah.
what this means. Now, most folks have probably not heard of RTMP. But essentially, this is sort of the server that's helping stream content into different, you can say, locations. So when you see a stream going off to YouTube or Facebook, the stream that you might see from custom streaming from Zoom, or if a real event, hybrid event is going on and you want to stream that back to a live platform, the technology that enables that is what is called RTMP. We're not going to go too deep into that, but essentially, if you're doing any form of event, this is a capability you need to have.
Yeah.
So right from having a camera feed going to your RTPMP server to a Zoom, for example, or to a software like Wirecast, or so if since you're in the UK, Amy, you probably have seen some of the Parliament things going live, being beamed on Facebook, or Rishi Sunak doing his live budget yesterday, I think, was it?
Yes,
And
it.
and the technology that's used to enable that is essentially RTMP is the core,
I
because
see.
they have a camera, they use encoder software like Wirecast, and then they push it to different destinations that can accept an RTMP feed. Those could be a platform like E2M, or they could be social platforms like YouTube, Facebook, etc.
Yeah, so
So
you can
it's really the yeah.
access a lot of people at one time. That's
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. That's interesting.
So it's really it's something that you'll see very often, and I thought I'll explain this because it's important if you're trying to do hybrid events.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really part of the spectrum. And this is another example, right? So this is a video that's happening like a real world, but again using RTMP, it's being streamed live. And again, there's an engagement component where you can donate to this text. So as I said, there are a lot of nonprofits as well, along with large companies who use our platform, and they were donating by texting to this platform. But the top feed is coming from the RTMP feed. So this was just one example of that.
so lastly,
Okay. Yeah.
and ROI, and you spoke a little bit about how we can go in and have a look at the virtual booths and how they simulate the in-person experience, but talking about how they really maximize ROI and the business deals that we used to, they were a really important part of the trade shows and everything. So just talk a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And we might exceed a few minutes, but I think trade shows are sort of a different animal than a traditional conference,
Yeah,
because there's some events which are pure trade shows. And I think trade shows have been very deeply impacted over the last 1 year because they relied so much on face to face.
definitely.
And there is really no Zoom equivalent for trade shows. You cannot do that. But the strange fact is that companies have grown as well without spending on trade shows, or they've sustained their revenues.
Yeah,
Now, what people have found is that you could sustain where you are, but growth is very difficult if you're in a B2B industry and you don't have a trade show model. And so one way is you cannot just have like a directory listing and expect people to engage. So having virtual booths, having visual booths, giving them the same experience, and yet giving them the ability to have a video conversation, to view all the collateral, to schedule a demo, or to schedule a meeting right from there. These are some of the key aspects when you're trying to do a online trade show. So this, for example, Amy, I'll spend a moment here. You can see that, the typical exchange business card, you can see that on top. You can see how the video room is working. You can see that this watch video actually has a YouTube. You can view collateral, or you can start a conversation right away, including having a messaging, a chat with them. And this is what you do. So having the entire suite rather than just a database entry is
yeah,
really key to having, of course, there's some elements of serendipity, which, to be honest, you could, I mean, there is an ability, for example, for random match.
yeah,
There's, as we said, this whole online thing is fueling offline and then further online. I think there are merits to both. But if you have to make it successful online, then you cannot, you should have all the channels available
Mm.
if that is to be successful for you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. You have everything there that you need, and the exchanging business card feature is fantastic, and joining the video room as well, so you can have
Yeah,
that connection is fantastic.
absolutely. Yeah. It's just another example of the booth. And finally, Amy, we're almost there.
Yeah,
Real-time analytics, so important. And the reason is, while you're holding something, you might get, you cannot get Google style analytics at the end. What you need is, like, whether it's a fundraiser or whether it's a corporate event, it's a sales kickoff, whether it's a university show, during the event planners need to track who's coming in, where
mm,
are they spending time, what exactly are they doing.
mm,
And for that, you need a real time, almost like a stock market screen, that Amy came in, she's
yeah,
watching this video, she's doing this. And of course, when you talk about GDPR, you can make them anonymous as well, if the person does not consent for his name to be known, but you can know that there is a visitor.
yeah,
So real-time analytics, I think, is another big learning. Earlier we used to send out, in the initial days, analytics after the event. But
yeah,
since we launched real-time with E2M, it totally changed the whole experience of the event admin staff. They could react in real time if somebody was having a question, a problem,
yeah,
if they wanted to move around. I mean, especially when your sessions are 3 days long, 30 days long, you need to move around sessions if the speaker is late or the speaker is not able to join, and so many other things.
mm.
Uh, so real-time analytics really changed the game for event planners.
Yeah, I think
Gave
it's
them an
great
insight.
to monitor
Yeah.
that. It's great to be able to monitor that, and how do we leverage this event data? Is it instant? Is it easily accessible like that?
Yeah, it's essentially browser based, right? So you get real time data. It's moving like a screen,
Yeah,
because traditional trade shows and events have a problem of dark data.
yeah,
The moment you check in a guest or an attendee,
mm,
most organizers have no clue what they are doing inside.
mm,
Right. I mean, they could not be, they could be watching a session, they could not be watching a session. They
mm.
have very little data in what's happening. I mean, you probably heard of those floor sensors where they're trying to see who's where.
Yeah,
That did not really work out because somebody who likes to smoke a lot was being caught.
yeah,
That he's spending his time in the rest area. But real-time analytics essentially helps in a better customer service,
yeah,
because what happens is that in the event world, knowing that something needs to change, if you know that later, then that's not really useful for you.
mm,
So you need to make sure that you react in real time, and that's
mm,
essentially the core.
yeah.
We are slightly ahead of time, but I think that sort of covers some of the key learnings, Amy, today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing everything you've learned, and some hints and tips and explaining some more of the technical side of things. It's been really insightful. So thank you, Sid. And yeah, it's so exciting to be going into hybrid mode and see, constantly learning and adapting the way that we're working. And I think it's a really exciting future ahead, just to maximize your events, and the participation, the networking, and just it as a whole package. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And as you can see, some of the companies we've worked with, the Fortune 500 companies, medium scale sort of companies. And if you want to head to our website after this, you can read some of our testimonials. Lucretia's one here, very kind words. And on there, you can see our brochure. You can book in a demo if you'd like to find out more about the platform. But please do join us now for the roundtable. If you've got any questions, we can open up a discussion with Sid.
Yeah.
And
I'll just answer one question, Amy, as we move to the roundtable. Does this platform have a green room? So yeah, absolutely, we have a backstage. In fact, Amy and me were there 10 minutes before, talking, prepping,
yeah,
and the moment the session starts, we have the option of going live, and when we go live, then the screen just comes up and we're live. So absolutely, and the other thing we learned, actually, I'm going to share a really quick and an important tip, probably as a parting gift before we go to the round table,
Yes,
is something that we've burnt our hands on, is do not forcefully end a session. So what you see here is that it says time exceeds by 3 minutes. Earlier, our platform had the capability to end the session automatically, which means, you know, but the fact of the event world is that not a single session perhaps ends exactly on time. Sometimes they need an extra 5 seconds. Sometimes they need an extra 5 minutes, like we seem to be taking. And I hope our audience does not mind. But another very important tip we would say is that please ensure that you're not forcefully cutting off sessions. I know it may not be convenient. They may be talking on the round tables, or as we are doing right now, exceeding the time, but you cannot.
yeah,
Trust from us, we've done thousands of events. It is you cannot, and especially if it's a famous speaker, if it's a celebrity speaker, and we get almost every other day in a week, we get someone from the who's who globally. You don't want to miss out on any word. So that's the last bit. And what, yeah.
in the in-person events, isn't it? When as soon as you start chatting and there's questions to be asked, it's very easily done. And to be able to have that feature, that's great for the
Yeah.
virtual things as well.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this, and I would request everyone not to leave. Meet us for a moment in the round table just to see the experience, and we would love to chat with you as well, and see if we could address any direct questions. So with that, thanks so much for being here.